Thanks, Kathy, for popping in the chat. We are ready to roll if you are. Do you think we need to hold for any more or just let folks filter in as they join?
I think people can come in as they join. I'll let you introduce yourself and Carrie, but I do want to thank the Unizin community for being here, and I particularly want to thank Instructure for meeting with us, for allowing us to crowdsource questions. It's a very personalized type of presentation, and I know that the folks who are not here really want to be. I've had several people say, can you send me the recording? And as soon as we get done, I will. So thank you for that.
Perfect. Thanks, Kathy. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Libby Knott, and I am the VP of Customer Success Management here at Instructure. I definitely see some familiar faces hopping on the call today, so good to see everybody. We had a product meeting, a roadmap meeting, probably last month, where we had a lot of interest coming out of the group on LTI 1.3 specifically. So we thought that we would schedule this call today with Carl Lloyd, who is joining me. He is our Canvas product manager in charge of interoperability. And he's going to do a presentation today on LTI 1.3. And I did share those crowdsourced questions that Kathy talked about earlier with Carl. So he's going to work some of those into the presentation today, but we should have a Q&A at the end and time for that. So if you don't get your questions answered, just hold those to the end and we'll make sure that we have time so that Carl can answer some of those. So with that, I'll open it up to Carl to go ahead and start the presentation.
Yep. Hey, everybody. My name's Carl Lloyd, and I've been at Instructure for 9 years now. I actually have met a lot of you over my time here at Instructure, and I've worked on the LTI standard at Instructure for the last 8 years. And during that time, I was co-chair of the IMS LTI working group that created the LTI 1.3 standard. And there's lots of questions about that and lots of interest, which is really exciting for me. We're still kind of getting our feet under ourselves on the LTI 1.3 support in Canvas. We have a lot of kind of bells and whistles that we added to the LTI 1.1 standard that we have to incorporate from 1.3. And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of work that we need to do. And there's a lot of work still to do, as we'll see. So I'll go ahead and open up the presentation. Here, hold on. Okay, move this over. I'm just going to keep this like this, if that's okay. So I just want to talk a little bit about what the team I'm working with works on. And the team that I work on works on a lot of things in addition to the LTI standard. We work on things like live events and additional services and things like that. So the first item on this list of what we're working on is wrapping up work around the Microsoft Teams Sync connector, which those are applications that Microsoft's been working on in collaboration with us. And we took on some work to be able to create a syncing connector between Canvas and Microsoft Teams. And we actually turned those on yesterday. And there's just a little bit of work that we're trying to wrap up there around scale and metrics and things like that. And then the other thing we're working on right now is false start readiness for services. We're doing some load testing on live events, and we're doing some load testing on some of the other services like assignments and grade service, things like that, just to make sure we're ready for false start. It's kind of par for the course. We try to do this for every false start. And we did this last year for false start with COVID. And so it's just something we've incorporated as something we start picking up in July. To be able to be ready for false start. And then the other thing that's going on right now is in the IMS LTI work, there is a special task force around cookie support for third-party browsers. We've been participating in that, and we are working on a small proof of concept based on the current strategy that we've all agreed on. It's something that we're working on in tandem with the other LMS platform providers, and it's something that we're working on, and it's not too much work, but it's something we should be able to have and be able to prove out and see if we've got a good strategy moving forward with some of the challenges that we've had with Safari and Firefox and Chrome around cookie support. So what's next? There's a whole bunch of options for what's next, but what's on our plate definitely for coming up is finishing up work around deep linking. And there was questions that came in around assignments and grade service and line item support for deep linking. This is all in the plan. The idea is that pretty much as the deep leaking spec is specified, we would be supporting that after this work is complete, and it would allow for tools to be able to support multiple returns of assignments. And we're working into this work the notion that if teachers are adding content to Canvas, either in the modules page or the assignments page, if there's line items associated or there's line items not associated with that content, then Canvas puts them in the right place. So line items would go to assignments, and if they don't have line items, that would be a non-graded item that goes to modules. So we're hoping for that. We have a whole line, a list of partners that are interested in this and ready to implement this, which is exciting. I think this will be good work and help alleviate some double clicking work that instructors have to do when they're bringing content into Canvas. What I'm currently looking at for the fourth quarter is more managing capabilities for developer keys. This is something that I've heard about ever since we released scoping for developer keys. I'm excited to actually get some prioritized place on the roadmap for this. And so what I'm working on right now is scoping that out. And I'm looking at number one is just allowing you to be able to see all the configurations for what's in the inherited keys. Being able to see the scopes, being able to see the details of the return URs, notes that we put in there. So all of that is what I'm working on right now. The other things that are in consideration is reporting, being able to export some reports around key configurations, and I'm looking into possibilities, some reporting around usage. So those are things that they're on deck for possibilities for this project. And the other two things that are important is if changes are made, how are admins notified? And then also we added at the end of last year, we added the capability on LTI 1.1 tools to be able to enable and disable placements per the tool configuration. And I'm looking at that also for 1.3. The one thing that's not in there is more in-depth key configurations at the account level. So like altering scopes, redirect URLs, services, things like that. That's not in scope for this, but it's definitely something that's in the back of my mind for a future iteration of this project. So for future consideration, there's a number of services that are sitting in public draft with IMS right now, or they're in the final stages of going public. And these are all on my radar, but the top two services that we're looking at right now is LTI dynamic registration, which would provide a programmatic way of configuring LTI 1.3 tools in Canvas. Basically, a tool could just provide their registration, or we could provide a registration URL to them, and then they can kick off a programmatic process that would register the developer key in Canvas. So that's something we're looking into, and it's there's a lot of work there. We've actually done some proof of concept work there, so it's something that that we want to pick up. We've had a lot of requests for it, and it also is important for us for some future work we have on deck, like developing a more formal developer portal and some things like that. So that's one of the reasons it's at the top of the list. And then the other thing is submission review. I don't know how many are familiar with this, but this is the concept or notion of being able to send back with a grade some additional artifacts like reporting, analytics, maybe some more details around the students' interaction with the content, things. It could even be things like plagiarism reports, things like that. So and the part of that too is working with the gradebook team to incorporate the assignments and grade service statuses of like pending and things like that are in the specification that we don't support at this time. And then these other four services are sitting out there. There's the Caliper Analytics Connector, which is just basically where Canvas would be proctoring a connecting, like basically passing the information of from an LRS to the tool of where to kind of send the live events data. There's the LTI group service, which is just some additional capabilities for groups in an LMS. And then there's proctoring service. And then brand new is data privacy launch, which is something that's on my radar, but I haven't had a lot of time to dig into that yet. But definitely those top two are the top two that we're receiving feedback on right now, and the things that we're looking at for the future. So that's pretty much it on kind of what's going on in interoperability space. I created this other slide that had other topics that that I'd heard. And so, and I'd like to fold questions into this too. So why don't we start with, is there any questions on any of the content that I covered so far? Okay. So then let's go through these. These are the topics that I didn't cover that were sent over, and some of the information that was sent from Kathy. So the first one is LTI 1.3 parity with LTI 1.1. They were specifically asking about that enable and disable of placements, which is something we're looking at with the develop key project that we're going to look at for fourth quarter. And I do know of one other place where there's there's a new collaborations UI that LTI 1.3 doesn't work with, and we're working on getting that up to date to support that. As far as that goes, I think we're really close around parity with LTI 1.1. I can't think of anything on the top of my head that we have where that we're not covering with placements or services support once we get the work that's planned for this quarter. Once we get that done, I think we're right there. And then LTI 1.1 to 1.3 tool migration. There was information that was sent over around the course navigation placements. That was the first time I'd heard of some issues with having those two placements side by side. And I think some of our assumptions around how migration would go at a school isn't actually meeting kind of what's going on in the field. And so that's something I definitely want to explore and see if we can provide a better migration experience around for you that are working with tools and migrating from 1.1 to 1.3. As we all know, that's going to just become more prevalent. So I probably would appreciate if there's anybody that's really passionate about that to let me know, and let's have some future discussions on that. And
yeah,
then
I would add to that one, Carl, to get that set up. Like if you want to do a deep dive, or if anybody on this call is really passionate about that tool migration, what that could look like, what your challenges are, I would say just reach out to your CSM and we can get a meeting lined up with Carl to do an individual session. Does that
absolutely
work for you, Carl?
Yep, I'm more than willing to do that. This
Perfect.
is something I want to get right. We try to do something that was a little more flexible than kind of what the other LMS providers were doing. One of them has like basically where when they recognize a 1.3 tool, they just completely replace the 1.1 tool, and there's not any backwards compatibility or kind of like a replay go back to the 1.1 state. So we tried to make it flexible, but it sounds like we're just not quite there. So definitely, yeah, talk to your CSM and let's get something, and let's talk about it and figure out what the right path forward is.
Great.
The voice thread support, I did a little research on that. We do have a ticket that's sitting out there that I'm trying to get somebody to look at right now. I think that's the last thing we need for them to be able to fully support 1.3. So I'll follow up on that and see if we can get that going and reach back out to voice thread and see if there's anything else that they're aware of that they're waiting on us for. And then the last question, this is a really good one, is LTI 1.3 support for beta and test. So LTI 1.3 is fully supported in beta and test, but there's an asterisk next to that. For the names and role service and the assignments and grade service, it requires it requires like actions to be done on behalf of a teacher or student in those cases. And so right now for those to work, it only works if the option is to allow teachers and students access to beta and test, but we plan in a future sprint to see if we can not require that access and allow those services to work in beta and test. So we're exploring something on that because I completely understand that that's not a setting that everybody wants to turn on. But yeah, that's pretty much straight up what the answer is on that one. But yeah, we do have partners that are testing in beta and test pretty regularly on their LTI 1.3 support. But yeah, there's that one little thing that we got to work on to make it better. What other questions or things do people want to talk about as far as LTI support? Don't be shy.
You can pop something in the chat too. I'll monitor that. It looks like we don't have anything yet, but anything for Carl would be great.
Carl, I feel like I always ask you questions. This is Andy.
I was wondering if Penn State was going to speak up.
Yeah, I always have questions, and I think you answered a lot of those in there. I think the parity thing is one thing we're really looking at. We just had some starts and stops probably the past 6 months of integrations that have been held up because there's something that's either not working or just not at the right spot it needs. I think VoiceThread is one of those, and we've had some others, Kaltura and other things in the past too. So that'll be good, and I think getting a lot of that done in the next couple of months would certainly help. Some other things I think we're being asked by vendors when they are working on their 1.3 integration is maybe you can add some more documentation for role mapping. Actually, I had to supply one vendor some of that this week, like which Canvas roles map to the context role, like teacher becomes instructor, right? It's a long version of instructor. But I think having those mappings would help because I actually had to go through and trial the different launches we have and then share those with them. So that I think that having that would be good for a documentation item. And the other one I had, I completely forgot what it was. Cookies. So I think that there's some older cookie information you guys have out there. I think that's some stuff that Jesse had put together. I think you had put some more updated information. But I think maybe just a one-stop shop of this is the page for vendors with LTI cookie issues and to have things there. So like IMS has been putting one together, but I know you guys have some ways to make it work. And I know we're getting close within IMS to have a established way to, this is how you need to fix it in IMS. But I know that you guys have had something for a while. The only way I can get vendors to get that is to really just go, hey, talk to the partners area and figure out what that is, right? So I think if you have some way to either document that or point vendors in the right spot of this which one to have happen, that'd be great. And maybe it's just so close to getting the IMS stuff together that you just point at that. But
we definitely
questions.
Yeah, we definitely want. I mean, we're really close, I think, on the IMS stuff, and if I think we're just a week or two from proving out if that's going to be the go forward, and we're kind of implementing that as we go. But yeah, that's good feedback. We should definitely update. I mean, the stuff we had before is just a blog post, but we should do an actual like documentation page. We're also looking at doing maybe some stuff like having a Ruby gem that has some of the cookie stuff incorporated into it. So tools that are at least could look at it as a code example of things that they can go off of. So yeah, that's good feedback.
Thanks.
Hey, Carl, this is Dave Long from the University of Iowa. I had a question kind of related. So I thank you for talking about LTI 1.3 on beta and test. And just if I understood that correctly, it's yes, LTI 1.3 works on beta and test, but there was some work to do with some other part about like instructor or student launches or something there. Is
yeah,
right?
So here I'll just go to my account here and I'll just show you real quick. Right now to get the services to work, so an LTI 1.3 launch will work in Canvas. It'll work in Canvas just fine, no matter what environment in. But as soon as a tool wants to do like a names and roles provisioning service inquiry, or they want to do something with assignments and grades, that's where we run into issue with beta and test. If I gotta remember where the setting is. And you're gonna see, because I'm in a site admin, so there's a lot more. This one right here, this beta and test access for students. If that's not set up, then it won't work currently in those environments. The other thing to be aware of too, this is just for knowledge information than anything else. This is something that we constantly talk to tools about. But there's some configuration that has to go on. The tool has to be able to accommodate the different issuers and different callback URLs for those different environments. So we have information here under configuring in our steps, but they need to be able to accommodate for like .beta, .test for these different parts, which are used in the authentication flow for OpenID Connect in the LTI like 1.3 authentication process. So if that's the number one thing is they need to do that. That's usually the first time when a partner asks me they're having problems. Usually that's the number one problem. The number two is they're trying to do some type of service and that setting's not set for those accounts. And that last thing is the thing we're working on. We think we can basically set these up so that they'll work in beta and test without having to have that flag on, and basically giving access to basically any teacher or student that may even stumble on those URLs. So
I got you. Thank you. We also have and maybe this is what Lynn mentioned in the chat, but we also have what's I believe is referred to as a test cluster. It's like a separate instance. So there's production beta test and then a test cluster. Production beta test are all in the whole release workflow cycle with the auto refreshes and things like that. Test cluster, from my understanding, gets code changes, but not production data synced over to it. So it's like it's in the past it's been, we open a ticket with Canvas support, and sometimes there's some back and forth there about getting test cluster refreshed, and then eventually it's a snapshot of all the production data at one point in time. Would everything you just talked about with LTI 1.3 hold true for the test cluster, or would that kind of be a different thing?
I'm going to be straight honest. I don't know. So I am going to do a takeaway on that to find out. Because I'm not sure I don't think we've accommodated for those changes in the URL for the issuers. And I'm not sure if just using canvas.instructure.com for those would work or not. But yeah, I'll do some research on that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And I appreciate the transparency and honesty too. Because not even LTI 1.3, but it's varied by vendor, and I think sometimes we've never been able to dig down deep enough to figure out what the thing is. But there's been times in the past where we've tried to do, okay, here's the LTI 1.1 integration, and we want to test that maybe longer than a month for whatever reason, right? And then we put it on test cluster. In some cases those work, sometimes they don't, and it's always been sort of a hazy question as to why they don't work. But that's a little bit outside of the scope of the focus today sort of thing. But thank you though. That's helpful to know.
Yeah, I was just looking at the comment from Lynn on how Oregon State tests LTI 1.3. That's that's a great way. I know that's not an option for everyone, but yeah, and especially with the vanity URL, that's super smart. That trips up a lot of partners.
Hi, Carl. This is Chris Scruton from the University of Minnesota. I had a question in the document, but I don't know. It might be orthogonal to your service, and so you may not know the answer. We had a question into our CSM about the future of the Edge App Center. We use it to manage sort of micro licensing situations where we have individual faculty members who want to integrate approved tools, but we can't integrate them at the account level, or we don't want to because we don't want to deal with the support overhead or the communication. Do you know what the plans are for the future with Edge App Center and LTI 1.3? I got the impression that it was sort of up in the air.
Yeah, it's technically still up in the air. We're evaluating what we want to do. The biggest thing, what you're talking about as far as being able to manage tools, we definitely, no matter what we do, we want to be able to keep that capability. And I'm considering kind of as we move away from kind of a configuration that has a key and a secret to something that has a developer key. How do we maintain that flexibility that we have today with LTI 1.1, and what modifications do we need to make to Canvas to maybe the developer key experience and capabilities for an admin, and then also what does that look like for an instructor that wants to incorporate tools into their course, and how do they do that? So there's a lot that has to go in. I would say definitely we're not nothing's going to happen quickly. I'm working with product marketing right now on getting even just official communication on our deprecation plans for LTI 1.3. We're looking at a pretty long period. I know IMS is really encouraging people only support it till the end of July or into July of next year, but we have so many tools in our ecosystem that's just not feasible. So a lot of these things we're looking at 2+ years to kind of figure out and get to. Yeah,
it makes sense. And we use it less. So if you guys are thinking about modification to it going forward. We use it less for sort of the community tools, the ones that you guys have already pre-baked in. We use it more for creating organizations and then delegating access to tools to those organizations. Especially because our instructors don't have the permission to add LTIs directly. And so this gives us a way to pre-approve tools and micro-target them like that. So yeah, if there was some way that we could maintain that capacity without really worrying about the community aspect of it, because I get that's probably a hassle dealing with all those community contributed tools and all that. That would be super helpful for us.
Awesome. Yeah, that's kind of in the line of what I'm thinking. But as I have more, I'll probably reach out to your CSMs and I'll solicit feedback. And I'd like to have something to present before we meet. So
great. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Hey, Carl. Derek at Unizin here. I'm particularly interested in the Caliper Analytics connector that you mentioned. And I'm kind of embarrassed a bit. I don't know anything about that, but that sounds very useful to us. Can you maybe describe that in a little more detail and let me know like how that relates to LTI? I can sort of imagine how you do that with LTI 1.3, but are you doing something different?
There's really not a lot to it. And part of it is we're trying to decide on at Instructure if we are interested in Caliper data. So that's partially why it's a little farther down on the list, but it really is simply just providing the details in the LTI launch, the third party of like where to send their live event, their Caliper data to. That's really the notion of what that specification is. And a lot of schools, at least some that I've talked to in the past, a lot of them that are sucking in a lot of data, they have those partners or those third parties actually just sending data directly to their LRS and not even worrying about anything with Canvas. And so it's just something we're looking into. It's something that's been in the works for a long time, but I haven't had really any requests for it. And it's just something I'm keeping my eye on right now.
Again, that sounds pretty interesting to us from our perspective anyway. I think we could definitely make use of something like that. So maybe I'll be sending you a request.
Yeah, if you can go out and take a look at that specification that they have that's in public final. And if you have any feedback on that for me, just send it over to me, Derek.
Cool, right on. And can I ask you about what perhaps might be an unrelated question, but something else that here at Unizin we're particularly interested in Canvas data too. Can we nudge you on that, guys? Or nudge you on that,
honestly, I don't know a whole lot. I don't know a whole lot about Canvas data too and what's going on there. So I probably would give you wrong answers.
Cool. No, thanks anyway.
Carl, I have a few questions, if that's okay. The first one was like last winter, we reported a bug to you with the migration tool where we had existing content item embeds from LTI 1.1 and we migrated it and then it just was completely broken. I was curious if there was
that should be fixed.
If leaking works now.
Yeah, that should be fixed. Yes, that absolutely should be fixed. Yeah. And then were you the one that sent in the information about the course navigation, like existing?
Yeah, so that was my next one. I was just kind of curious, like what your guys' sort of expected workflow for that was. Because
yeah, so I'll tell you what.
From my point of view, it's just kind of confusing. I would expect it to.
Well, I mean, that feedback's perfect because we don't really know how it's going to be utilized by all the admins, and so our assumption is that there'd be a testing period. The LTI 1.3 tool could be installed. Once it's installed, Canvas recognizes it and basically ignores the 1.1 configuration where like all the embedded content is. You test it out and everything looks good. You remove the LTI 1.1 tool, but it doesn't sound like that's exactly how everything works in reality. And so, yeah, it does override everything as far as the tool goes, except for those like navigation placements. Those still live and function on the 1.1 configuration. So it sounds like to me that Matt, that we need to do a little thinking about providing a better workflow or maybe even like some type of migration tool to help with that.
Yeah, I just would expect it like every time there's any sort of 1.1 placement to redirect to the 1.3, and that's a spot in the left nav where it's continuing to do 1.1 and continuing to do the wrong tool rather than the updated one. So I just was really confused.
Yeah, and it may be as simple as doing that, like looking at being able to just redirect that placement. So I've got some homework to do on that.
Awesome. And then my last one was the thing that I keep on bugging you about, allowing like multiple deep
Line
linking
items.
embeds in like, in a content page or in an assignment, like tying each of those deep links to a grade in the grade book without it being a separate assignment. I know you said that was something that's sort of like a much longer term project. I was curious if there are any updates.
Yeah, I don't have any updates on that. And I really want us to figure out something around that. I do hear about that from time to time. It's not super big. And just for everybody else that's on the on the call, what Matt wants to do is basically take like a content page and embed multiple different kind of like different activities in that, and each of those activities align to a different gradebook column in the gradebook. And that's something that technically the assignments of grade service supports with the line items, but Canvas's functionality around how assignments and gradebook columns, there's a one-to-one tie there. In most cases, like that makes it really hard.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Carl.
Looks like Maggie's a fan of that.
Yeah, we're drinking the Kool-Aid here at IU. So we're just very much about formative assessment.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, Matt, there is something like that that's being discussed in the IMS working group. So if you guys are a member and like to hear or find out more, let me know, or Carl, we can get you in touch and talk about that a bit.
Yeah,
something that may fit that kind of requirement. I think we talked about it, Carl. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I don't think they're really, it's called LTI activity item. I really don't think they're really thinking of it in the notion that like Matt is, but when that was presented, that's exactly the use case I was thinking of. So in either case, like we've really got to think about kind of like our underlying architecture around how the gradebook works in Canvas to be able to do some more cool, innovative things like that. Well, it sounds like we're out of questions.
Yeah, anything else for Carl, guys? I know that we're
So I have one thing. So somebody asked about the proctoring service. There wasn't any details behind it, but I was just kind of curious if whoever was asking about it or somebody has interested in that, if they can talk a little bit about that, if they're working with a partner, because I only know of one partner that's kind of been playing around with it, but I don't know of anyone else. So if anybody can talk around the proctoring service, that'd be, I think, helpful for me.
Well, this is Maggie from IU. I don't, the concept of a service is not something that I really exactly know what it means, but we work with Examity and we have been very interested in, well, we keep pointing them at Respondus and going, we want an integration that is, inside, or more like turn it in, like where you say, I want this proctored, and then in your settings, many of those things come up that would be talking back and forth with the actual tool that you want to be communicating with. And so you wouldn't, because right now we have this complicated thing, if they have nightly jobs, stuff gets sucked over, and and I think they do a lot of stuff with APIs. And so not only do we want to avoid API calls, obviously, but also just getting a better embedded experience so you're not hopping in and out. And I think that's the kind of thing that would really be interesting, to just make that tighter. We're always looking for tighter, and showing people the way to do that. I think, and you've alluded to it a couple of times, the tool providers do things in so many different ways. It makes you crazy. And the more every time I see somebody who says, well, you make your account in our platform and then you push a button and it syncs back over, and I'm just like, don't, just please stop doing that. So helping them envision, even, right? For the vendors themselves, helping them envision, like, this is really the experience that we want. So that's the kind of thing that I think about with a service, and whether I'm off base or not, I don't know, but that again is sort of what I'd like to see.
Yeah, I think your desire is spot on, and it's definitely something we want to enable. But I'm gonna, the proctoring service as it stands right now, I don't know if it would enable what you're hoping for. And I'm also keeping an eye on, because there's another LMS that's been implementing it for a while, and they've run into a lot of issues with it. So I've been kind of keeping an eye on that spec to kind of see how it evolves. But as of right now, yeah, Examity's asked me about it, but Examity definitely wouldn't be my first preference for a vendor to implement that right off the bat and kind of like test the waters with. But definitely like the notion of kind of being a little more opinionated with our partners, especially in certain verticals of partner tools, and being a little more opinionated about how they implement and integrate into Canvas. That's definitely an area I want to obtain and get to. And there's some active discussions going on inside the Instructure leadership team about actually being supportive of those type of activities, and actually slotting out investment for those. So I'm really excited. I mean, it's something I've kind of been fighting for the last 8 years, and then I'm definitely seeing support for it, which I've never seen before. So I think things are only going to get better once we can get down to like one standard and kind of something that's a little more future proof. I think we're going to see a lot of advancements and see a lot of benefits in the future. We just got to get some of these things like the deep linking support that we're working on, get those out of the way, and get a couple other things like dev key management and stuff to get you guys some more tools, and then we can start working on innovating.
And I think that was my question, Carl. I know we've talked about it, so it's more of a, hey, what's the update on going on with it? And I know there's issues with the spec and how you can implement it. It doesn't really fit a lot, probably almost all of our use cases, how we actually do proctoring in higher ed. We're not proctoring an external quizzing solution. We're proctoring the LMS.
Yeah.
And the spec really didn't work for that. So yeah, that's kind of the problem. And I completely agree with you on, there are some of the, you want to fix the base parts before you worry about the innovation. And that's completely in line with what I think we would like to see as well. We need to get people over to 1.3, especially now that 1.1 is kind of dead from IMS. They dropped certification. So in a year, there's not going to be anyone certified in 1.1. So we really have to get 1.3 conversions going. And it took us several years to get as many tools in as we have now, that even just converting all of those to 1.3 the next year is a pretty heavy lift. So we need to stretch that out a little bit, right? And we can't have like problems in each one of them. So that's really where we prefer to have the effort thrown at the moment. But I think proctoring is something where it has a lot of attention, particularly in the past year. And we don't want to necessarily have a kind of the bespoke integrations that are occurring right now with these vendors, because they're kind of difficult to understand and evaluate security-wise, how they do plugins and all the kinds of stuff, that it gets kind of difficult. And that's where we want IMS to kind of step in and help out.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree, Andy. That one, just being in some of those IMS meetings, which I've seen a lot of you the last few days, being in those IMS meetings, they kind of go, and the proctoring thing, and then they, next, it doesn't really seem to be all there yet.
Yeah, actually, you've all mentioned kind of like some pain points in working with partners. That's feedback I would love to hear about. And I know our partner team would love to hear about it. I work with them really closely, and don't be shy to send those into your CSMs and just say, hey, will you send these to the partner team and Carl? And they can just forward them over, and I can keep collecting those. But Examity is definitely a vendor I'm very familiar with, but some of the others you're working with, I probably don't know about. And it'd be good to hear about those experiences and challenges that you're running into.
One last thing, Carl, that there was an announcement, I guess, this week about the ed tech ecosystem
collective.
Can you talk a little about that? Is that a big change, or is anything changing there? Is it just a rebrand?
It's not really a huge change. Really, they're trying to put some focus into a community space where we're revamping partners having access in the community, And we're trying to get to a future state where we're just providing more value. In fact, I need to talk to you, Andy, because I think the partner team wants to talk to you guys about kind of the stuff you're doing around vetting partners and things. So there's some questions there on some of the work they're doing towards that collective. But that would be definitely, I think, a good discussion for a future Unizin meeting. To bring in like Katie Vargo and some of and maybe Dave Nelson.
I think if Instructure's interested in that, I'm sure Unison could arrange it with our communities. You just let us know.
Yeah, I'll talk to the team. I have a meeting with them tomorrow, and I'll bring it up.
Sounds great, Carl. And if there's timing, once that kind of all gets established that we want to throw out,
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Folks, I'll help arrange.
Okay, perfect.
Great idea.
What's the best way to have follow-up? Because there are likely to be folks who are watching the recording next week.
Yeah, I think the best way is to send it through your CSM and then have them forward it over to me. And whether that's, hey, here's some feedback I have, or here's a question I have, or hey, we'd really like to talk to you about this specific thing that's kind of like coming up. Yeah, I would coordinate through your CSM. I'm more than willing to help out however I can.
The only other thing I would add is that down the pike, when looking at potential changes to the gradebook to do really cool things like, having multiple objects that could go to different gradebook columns, is to bring in faculty early and often, because some of the usability issues have been relatively significant. And so what we think people are going to do is not at all how they perceive it. But that's just my 2 cents.
No, that's a really good point. And like I had a little clip in there around there's some capabilities in the assignments and grade service where a tool can provide back statuses, and those touch the gradebook, and we haven't implemented those because we understand that gradebook changes are just really sensitive topics for instructors, and we have to coordinate with the assignments team that's working over the gradebook, and then also the product manager. So there's just a lot that goes in there, and then we don't want to just hurry up, rush, get something out there and then impact everyone.
Sounds like that might be it. Anyone else? Last call. This is Kathy. All right. I want to thank Libby and Carl for being with us today. And I will get the recording out either later this afternoon or early on Monday. Probably Monday. People actually look at it. Thank you so much for spending the time with us, for reading through our questions so carefully. Much appreciated. Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a
Cal.
good weekend.
Thank you all. Bye.